We're going.
Knotwork, episode 2.
Episode 2. Yeah. Welcome back. And today there's a theme or a topic. Last time, we just kind of introduced everything, what and who we are.
Laid it all out.
Sort of the principles of why we're doing this. But today we're going to talk about manifestation. That's a pretty, very often talked about in a lot of older texts and things like that. But on the other side of the coin is a very sexy and fashionable approach to spirituality, I guess, in modern day America. So
yeah, I think you're right on with that, because the yogis talked about invoking your creative power, but that word manifestation, I am recognizing there's a trend in that. It's like becoming more popular to talk about that, but maybe people are just becoming more alive to their own potential.
Right.
In like a collective way, people are more excited about seeing, I can do more than I thought I could.
Yeah.
So they're using the word manifestation. Yeah. This is what I'm kind of understanding.
Right. Now, how would it, out of curiosity, just from your knowledge and your background, how would you go about defining or explaining what manifestation is in your practice?
Yeah. One thing that's coming to my mind immediately is this ability to do what I say I'm going to do.
Mm-hmm. That's always a good place to start.
Yeah, that's it.
Yeah.
Can I develop the capacity to just do what I set out to do? Whether I spoke it or I created an intention and then carry that through. This is so far my understanding of manifestation. And I think we could keep exploring that deeper. Yeah. But that is a power. And it is something you cultivate. At least for me personally, with my background, that's something that had to be cultivated in terms of just practicing daily, practicing yoga daily. And I was just talking about this, but I remember a day when I felt that yoga was worth investing my time in, and I was really passionate about it, and I immediately felt the benefits. I felt good after practicing, so it was really clear that this is something that's good for me. But so then that translated into wanting to make it a part of integrate it into my life. How do I integrate it in my life? So I determined, with the help of my teacher, why don't you pick 3 days in the week where you practice yoga? You pick 3 days, and those 3 days you practice. And I thought, piece of cake.
Right.
No problem, because I love it. And I tell you that the weeks to follow were hellish, because what I started to discover was that I couldn't do what I set out to do. So many excuses came, so many reasons why I couldn't just do something that was good for myself.
Right.
What was this day? I slept in. Or this, I ate too much. Or something came up. And if I looked back at what that was, it was ridiculous. I mean, it was just the lousiest excuse. But for me, that was so real. So when we talk about manifestation, the first thing that's coming to my mind is just that ability to have a special intention, set that, and carry it out as best as you can.
Right. And the whole excuse generator, that thing is fun. That's about like one of the best parts about committing to any sort of practice or discipline, because I've had that. Like, I have played guitar my whole life, and I love it. It's it's one of the sort of means to creating things for me. And it's great for that. But anytime I've ever tried to make it a discipline to pick it up like once a day, every day,
Yeah.
for an hour, just to practice. Anytime I would try to do that, it was whatever excuse I could find to get out of it. And that's what playing the guitar is what I would do, just out of desire to play, always growing up. But as soon as I have to, I don't want to.
Yeah, that
You know?
is interesting phenomenon.
Right.
Uh-huh.
But and one of the things I've noticed in, what I've come to understand about manifestation is being able to sort of deal with that and overcome that a bit. It's that, like you were saying, just be where you say you're going to be. And it really is just, it's because it comes to deciding an outcome, and I think we talked about this last time too. There's a couple of different ways to approach it. You won't get the outcome that you want by making plans for it, by telling the universe, like, hey, this is going to happen this way. You have to sort of ask for it. You have to intend for it. And I think that coming to that understanding, or being able to sort of look at it like that, was a thing that I started getting really early on from learning about it.
Yeah, that's a really beautiful way to look at it. Like instead of a demand, like an attitude that you are bartering with the universe, like more of an attitude of, I guess that's just more openness, more open to different possibilities, but you're setting a special intention, hoping that you can collaborate with the universe or collaborate with whatever, some higher power or larger intention.
Work with the greater forces, not against.
Let that, yes.
I mean, I can't think of, I'm just trying to, scramble for an analogy of like my body, like what, I don't think that, I mean, my body needs certain things, but if I'm thirsty, there's no part of me that's like demanding it necessarily. This is a really terrible analogy now that I'm thinking about this.
No, it's not actually. I don't think it is.
You can spin it in gold.
I think we can spin this around.
I'm crashing and burning with it.
No. I think this can be spun around because your whole body participates in that innate desire to satisfy thirst. Yeah. Like your toe is not disagreeing that like you don't really need a drink.
Right.
Your tongue and your toe is not arguing with each other. There's like a kind of holistic, like this water is actually going to nourish this whole being.
Right.
So if you could take that same idea and expand it to the whole, whatever our concept of that is.
Right.
Then, which I just feel is, from what I understand right now, it's like a day by day continual reflection and process of remembering how I'm integrated with a much larger spheres and circles.
Yeah.
And that's just kind of like the idea there that when you take a drink, that your whole body is participating in that together. Like there's a total integration in that.
Yeah.
They're not arguing. These different parts aren't arguing with each other.
There's not one part that's forcing another part to do to do something. There's no muscling to get the water.
Yeah. I've not studied this, but Swamiji's told me about this text called Purusha Sukta, which is very ancient collection of verses on the truth, but the universe is conceived as a whole person there. So whoever composed it, or the rishis who captured this vision, was like the whole universe is one organic being.
Yeah. That's
working together. So they conceived it as the Purusha word here just means a person.
Right.
A whole integral being.
Yeah. Yeah. So, just a singular organism.
Yes.
Yeah. That's how it's been helpful for me to look at things too. Like what you mentioned about the becoming aware of the outer spheres, moving farther and farther out to see these bigger aspects of your being or whatever.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, manifestation, even the sexy modern Western stuff is very, like, the heart of it is just that understanding that you're connected. You are just as much a part of this as anything else. It's all connected. And by that, you have a consciousness that is, or the right hardware mixed with the consciousness to actually create things, with artistic creation, or by an idea, having an idea, and that idea came from wherever in the ether. But it was, the idea comes to you, and then now, as that sort of act of creation, you then take that idea and put it out somehow into the physical world, whatever it is.
Yeah.
But in doing that, a lot of the stuff that I would invest my time in learning about it, because there's on YouTube countless like manifestation coaches and things like that.
Oh,
and
wow.
all this available information, and a lot of it is really solid because they get through to a lot of these like deeper spiritual aspects, like the oneness. You can just pull things out of this collective consciousness. You can choose it. You can, if it's something that you want, you can pick it from that collective consciousness, because if it exists there in you, then it's going to has to exist out here. And in that case, and this is where so much of it became fun, was the law of assumption is one of these laws of manifestation, how it works.
Okay.
This law of how the universe works, and what it is that you assume something, like if you have a particular desire and you want it, you put yourself in that mental, that sort of feeling and mental state where you already have that thing. And so it's assumed that you already have it. And then the universe has no choice but to reflect that back to you as like almost a mirror. And so that's where it becomes really, really fun to think about with stuff like that. Because a lot of it, the sexiness is like, do you want more money? Do you want a better body?
I was going to ask you, why do they think it's sexy? Or maybe just like, what is I'm not sure or totally aware of what is the modern idea of manifestation. But it's something like you're just saying here, like you have a certain goal, like making more money.
Yeah, opening a business or being in that, taking a trip, being able to just whatever you want. And then to be able to put yourself in that spot to where you feel like you have it.
Yeah.
And then it happens somehow. And weirdly enough, when I've tried this sort of approach, I mean, it doesn't seem fail-safe, but there definitely seems to be a lot to it.
Correlation. So when you've practiced manifestation, and when you've done it, you've started with this law of assumption.
Yeah, that's the one.
How you've entered into it.
That's because there was, checked out the like 20th century Christian mystic. His name was Neville Goddard. Okay. He's the big law of assumption guru. He's the one who brought it out to the public and was like, check this out. And the only way to know if it works, if it's true or not, is to do it yourself. Sure. And then, there's all this anecdotal evidence that's picked up, that you can hear from people, but it really is something that when you experience it.
Yeah. From like, I was just thinking about this from a yogic perspective of looking at this more in an energetic way. I was just thinking, whatever you place your attention on will start to grow. Yes. And it will start to gain a life to it. You are giving life to something. So that's why as yogis, we are always shifting our attention to these fundamental things like our breath and watching the breath. But if I took that same idea and then applied it to something else, like a particular vision of what I wanted to see myself, or what I wanted to see myself doing or manifesting, whatever that is, then you're giving it life or giving it energy.
Yeah.
And so your whole thought process is starting to revolve around that. Like, I was thinking about this too in terms of like a pull, like a gravitational pull.
Mm-hmm.
If you created something that, if you gave something so much attention, then other things could be drawn to that.
Yes.
Like it could be pulled to it because you create a kind of force after a certain period of time.
Yeah, and
it develops a weight to it.
Yes.
That attracts things.
Yeah.
This makes sense.
It does. It does. And that, yeah, no, perfect. Because that's how I like to envision things, you know,
Sure.
sort of your center of your being sort of being a star or a bit of a black hole, this thing that has a gravitational pull.
Mm-hmm.
And, you know, the things in your just a waking consciousness are the things that are there spinning around, cycling around that
Mm-hmm.
central star. But what those things are become your focus. Those
Mm-hmm.
things could be good things or bad things. You know, you could it's very easy for me to trap myself in a prison of negativity and dwell on that, and then wouldn't you know, that's stuff starts happening outside in the physical world. I'm already looking for those things, so I'm more apt to find them.
Yeah.
Because that's where my focus is.
Mm-hmm.
But then also the universe, it really is this weird sort of a law that it just loves you so unconditionally. Whatever you ask for, it's just like, here you go. Like you're clearly want to be miserable. So absolutely, here's as much misery as you want. I love you. Take it. You know?
That's interesting.
And but what gets around that star, what gets pulled into that near orbit are those different energies. So if you tend to think more negatively or tend to think more positively, those things appear out of that outer subconscious or whatever, and that's where that you start to notice that pull. And this is interesting too, that's sort of on that. One of the big things that a lot of these manifestation gurus talk about is the importance of a self-concept, how you view yourself and how you see your thought patterns and how you see your emotional triggers and things like that, and then learning how to address those things, which is actually really profoundly powerful.
Yes.
You know, hearing from this really like in your face lady on YouTube that is like, you want all this money, you want that perfect relationship, all you have to do is go deep inside and do that really intense loving work on yourself. And it like that, so hearing that, like being able to see that's so much of what it is. Like, oh, there is legitimate truth here.
Yeah.
You know?
There's it's reminding me of a sutra from Patanjali Yoga Sutra. It's the first one in chapter 2 where he's talking about the pillars of yoga, the foundation of what is the practical steps to yoga. And he says it's tapas, swadhyaya, and ishvara pranidhana. Tapas means purification and also energizing yourself. And then swadhyaya means then you develop a new kind of mind that can reflect and do that work you're talking about. The ability to look back and see, like, where do I want to course correct? What are my hang-ups? Like, where have I made a mistake? And do that without feeling like anytime you look into that, you're actually just drugged down by it.
Right.
Like I've been really reflecting about this ability to see my person's faults and things that I want to correct about myself without feeling drugged down. That's the best way I can say it. Without feeling like that leads me into a state of just becoming that. Like to see it really clear and then say, oh, I know how to make corrective steps towards that. Yeah. Like, oh, here's what I learned from it, instead of here's just why I was a miserable guy.
Right.
And I'm just going to continue being that guy. Like, oh, that's where I made a mistake, and now I can look back. So that's called swadhyaya. And then ishvara pranidhana can mean really entwining with the universe. So,
which is a fun part. It sounds like all the fun stuff.
So, yeah, this is what Sage Patanjali lays down as like a foundation for yoga.
Right.
In that second. But it's kind of, I was just thinking about that because you talked about so much of manifestation you're discovering to be is this ability to notice your like different emotions and how that's either hindering your growth or supporting your growth.
Right.
Those kind of things.
Yeah. Yeah. And it's crazy too, because when I started getting into it, I wasn't, I was interested. I was curious about it. Mm-hmm. And, I had been investing amount of time, some time into spiritual concepts and ideas and things like that. But I realized that this really cut through a lot of the shit and was able to provide some really, really awesome like
steps,
insights to myself.
Oh, okay. Mm-hmm.
I mean, because that's the thing. Let's just a hypothetical. Like you have a job, you don't get along with your boss. He's an asshole every time. So every interaction sucks. You don't like each other, and it's to that point where, every time you think of him, you just think of this negative situation. You just get that prickly, angry feeling in the back of your neck. You tense up and like that sort of thing. And that happens when you think about him. And so you think about it, and then you start feeling that. And there are modern like neuroscientists and stuff who say that your mind doesn't know the difference between what it's reacting to there or what it's reacting to in the real world. So, then once you start to try and go down that manifestation world, it immediately shows you, like, it lets you see, like, you have to do a serious course correction in the way you think. So you'll start to think of this person and get all worked up and frustrated, and then that little tidbit of what you've been listening to will come in and be like, no, course correct. Think about this person differently. And so you start to slowly start to push against that momentum that goes typically one way, and you start spinning it the other way.
Sure.
And pretty soon you start having healthier, better thoughts about this person. And so these exchanges that you're imagining are becoming less imagined fights and more imagined, like, let's laugh and joke and be buddies at work. And then lo and behold, that ends up happening.
Yeah. This is the way actually that Swamiji has described for me how puja works. The whole idea behind, I don't know how familiar with that you are. We've talked about that with the Shiva Lingam a little bit, but like puja, where you make an offering.
The table.
Yeah, like an idol or something, or a murti. We don't really call it an idol, but a murti, or a form that inspires you and uplifts your mind. And then how you keep approaching that day after day, making an offering, how it can totally transform. But it need not be an animate thing, though that can gain a certain kind of frequency. But it could be another human being that you just, like you're saying, you work in the opposite direction. Mm-hmm. But one way that's similar to this, that's been shared with me, that's a lot simpler. Well, I don't know if it's a lot simpler, but it's worked for me, and I'm still at practice in it, is to, okay, let's take the example with the boss who, for whatever reason, because of the way that he's interacting with you, and maybe you don't feel heard, or maybe you don't feel like you have any resonance. So there's a kind of clash, and then that kind of leaves you with this sour taste in your mouth every day. And then even you go home, you carry that story with you, and you're dreading getting up and going to work. So in that scenario, one way that's been presented to me that I'm practicing is, you touched on it a little bit about actually allowing myself to notice what I feel sensation-wise and energy-wise in my body, and then just creating a new pattern where I don't have to associate and use the words around that. About, like, typically it would just be, I'm angry, he's an ass, this is never going to work out, I got to get out of this job. So you're using all these words, but there is a felt sense and energy behind it, like a feeling behind it. Like you even talked about the prickly in your neck, like those kind of things. So it becomes a much more freeing and less binding experience if I just allowed myself to notice what I felt in such interactions, and then full stop. Mm-hmm. And then I didn't have to necessarily even put a word around it. because a lot of times those words create a kind of story that typically is like in that pattern of binding instead of releasing, which I think you're talking about, like going one way versus the other way.
Yeah.
So yeah, in such situations, I've been starting to learn how to go, oh, that's just what's showing up in my sensations and body, and it need not be right or wrong. Though I may not want to live continually in that space, but it gives me a lot more freedom to interact with that person differently.
Right.
Or just maybe be really upfront and honest and say, ooh, like the way that showed up is pretty painful, but it gives you a little bit more compassion because there must be a reason why that person is acting that way. There must be some kind of, it just expands your mind to think like that.
Mm-hmm.
There's probably a reason why they became that person. They needed to get some needs met or something, and then they ended up in this space. So it's coming out on you. But I like both approaches. I think I've never really tried like intentionally thinking about somebody like that in the opposite way.
Mm-hmm.
I think it's worth trying. I've been learning how to just notice what it feels like and sense it, and then softening the words that I have around those sensations.
Right.
Does it make sense?
Yeah. No. I get it. One thing I do want to get back on a little bit.
Sure. What's that?
Going back to a number of minutes ago. But I wanted to ask, with your your developing concept of manifestation through yoga and how you've learned about it through that.
Yeah.
Has there ever been anything specific that you've tried to manifest or just whatever, something, anything?
Yeah.
Yeah.
What I'm doing right now.
Same. Yeah. Isn't that wild?
Yeah. That's in so many levels. Actually, this podcast is one of those.
Mm-hmm.
And also just the work that I'm doing here at the ashram is something that I really had spent a lot of time laying the groundwork for many years to do this. And so those are two examples.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and another one, I guess going back to my initial story with yoga, was just manifesting a healthy body and just the ability to breathe clearly through my nostrils.
Right.
Actually, that I really
That's
want.
Be awesome.
It's the best.
Yeah.
So that was what was so frustrating to me. That was one of my main reasons for practicing is I couldn't breathe, and I felt like no human being should have to live life this way, live this kind of experience where you can't even use your nose and your mouth breathing, and you go outside and your whole body itches,
right,
and you feel exhausted all the time. And I just met somebody who said, you don't have to live that way, and you practice these things and that goes away. So part of that may have been just this setting that right intention and kind of a trust, and then getting the daily feedback, like the feedback you're talking about when you're starting to notice what's like being drawn to you. So I was just getting some feedback like, this works, and I've tried everything else. Everything else, very limited sphere of what I knew at the time, like stop eating all the things that you love. That's so hard.
Right. Yeah.
So, okay, let me kind of experiment with that, and it didn't work. So, yeah, I was really convinced and had a kind of conviction about that, and it works. No more allergies.
Yeah.
So
that's wild. And you have more stories about your vision and stuff like that.
Oh yeah, that's another example.
It has the same sort of story.
Yeah. So I'm still keeping an open mind about that, because I tend to have this bad habit of feeling like, well, great, I did this, and I want to keep really open about that, because I have no clue. I mean, as I'm talking to you right now, I feel kind of stupid about some assumptions I've made in the past about like what yoga is really capable of.
Mm-hmm.
But I really don't know.
Why?
Like
Why would you
what's its limitation, like its limits are. Just because I have to be really careful in my speech about like what I say. What I say, like we can
like
do.
snake oil salesman. You don't want to really be that. This is a cure all for everything. That's
Well,
sort of a
yeah,
thing.
that's one thing.
Oh, okay.
I should also just be speaking from my own experience and know and have the like capacity to know where that ends.
Okay.
There's so many more things about yoga that happen that I keep discovering and realizing. Like I thought that yoga could do all these things, and then that's it. And I'm realizing like there's so much more that is probably possible.
Right. Yeah.
I just am gonna keep it wide open.
Sure.
And mostly keep my mouth shut.
Sure. Well, I think it's important to note that yoga is a very powerful means. It's a very powerful tool for those things. But I think those things that you're referring to are just your mind actually being able to do that. You know, yoga opens up those sorts of doors in your consciousness and things like that, which I think is where that important stuff and where that cool stuff happens.
Mm-hmm.
But there's a million ways to get to that point. But the really important thing is just that understanding that you are that controlling power in your world. You know, you are God in this world. That's all there is, you know. So yeah, if that's you, if that's in you, which it is, then that God has God power, you know, that.
Yeah. So there's like.
So and that all comes out through your mind, and
I was thinking about this a lot because, yeah. So there's these statements that we find like in our sacred text. There's these statements that yes equate you with God,
mm-hmm.
and then the thing is that sounds really awesome. And I have a certain affinity for when I hear that. Oh, sweet.
Yeah.
And please say that again. But the thing is, what I'm discovering is that the real teaching unfolds when you see that that's a total contradiction. And you're like, that's actually not possible. Because then when you do that, like, I'm not God. Like, how? What do you mean by that? That's like, you're telling me that I created this whole thing. So, yeah, when I hear that, then what I'm discovering is that when I think about that contradiction and how impossible that is, then that puts me in more of a listening mode for my teacher to show me how it's possible.
Right.
And say, no, here's the steps. So, yeah, I trust in that, and I'm seeing that, though, like that mindset. I guess this kind of goes back to what you're saying about there are many paths. Is I feel like the first thing, if we're like talking about manifestation, I guess bringing it all in, the first thing is that trust in yourself.
Right.
Like that trust in whatever your idea your ideas about self or God or higher power or whatever, but that ability, that trusting in oneself that I am capable of doing this, I feel is the real.
Yeah.
That
it's always that I am part.
That desire. That desire is that.
Right.
There's that's how the rishis in some of our texts talk about the creation of the universe. They say that supreme being, kama, so kama yata, he or she desired. So desire is at the very heart of creation.
Yeah, which is wild, because without saying it exactly like that, or without saying it in that way, that's what every bit of the law of assumption stuff and the law of attraction stuff hints at.
Okay, cool.
You know,
I was gonna ask you, like, can you give me an example of something that since you've been aware of this, you've manifested?
Yeah, there have been a number of things where it feels like a conscious manifestation, like something that a thing that I held in my conscious thought that ended up happening. A lot of times it's pretty small, like just seeing, you know, like, and just trying to have fun with it, see if I can get the person in front of me at the drive-thru to pay for my food, which has happened. Happened randomly a couple of times, or like a free coffee in the morning or something like that. Yeah, like things like that'll happen. There was one time, this is like November, I think, shortly before the holidays. I was just at work one day and just kind of like letting my mind wander, and ended up like going into this fantasy where like my boss handed me just like $100, like, here's a little bonus, you're doing great, whatever. Literally the next day he went through everybody in my area and pulled us all aside and gave each of us $100 bill. So that's weird. Like when you in doing these practices, you start to pay attention to those things, and and so much of it is trying to understand that there's no such thing as a coincidence. Yeah.
So I guess that just made me think of something too that I'm reflecting on too in relation to manifestation. Is this like difference between being an actual creator and then just being more and more aware of what is unfolding? And I think that I'm more at the level of just being more aware about what's actually unfolding and what's already in motion. Right. So like there's already a set of causes that are playing out into effects. And there's a certain relationship between them. And just becoming more aware about how things are going to unfold. And I feel like that may have been what happened when you were having that. It could be what was happening when you were seeing your boss do this. Yeah. Like that happens too I've had that happen frequently in dream, where I had a particular interaction with somebody, like physically, and then that ended up playing itself out the next day, or pretty close to that. Just becoming aware of those connections. So,
and that's
which is not, in my mind, that's not creation. That's not manifestation. Not manifestation. It's just like being more alive to what's going on.
Right. I mean, I think it's if you come from the approach of it's all from the subconscious, all from that that big collective unconscious mind, and that if you consciously think of something, that will, over time, will start to imprint the subconscious, and that's when all the stuff happens. So that's the thing. What my understanding of law of assumption would have me believe is that when I was having that very vivid daydream about my boss handing me $100, in that, somehow in that state of consciousness, I was easily able to imprint that into the subconscious, and that then allowed it to happen easily. It was real quick, easy work for the subconscious.
Yeah. So when you say subconscious, do you mean a collective mind?
Yes.
Like a kind of mind that people can connect to?
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
It's the one that the mediums go to, and that's where like the enlightening experiences all sort of happen in that realm. But it's weird, because when it starts to happen, or when you start to notice it, because I think that's like going back to what you just said, the increasing of the awareness of being able to see this cause and effect and understand that it's this thing that's sort of moving in time, but they're energies, they're waves that are creating actual phenomena, actual events. But when you start to become aware of that, it really is kind of freaky. At first, you feel like it was this, like, I remember just having a feeling of like that real sense of like, oh, I am much bigger. There's so much more here, you know, and you sort of feel like an accidental sorcerer, because all of a sudden, out of nowhere, you're finding that there's this malleability to the universe around you, that you can actually, just by focusing energy or focusing a sense of power inside yourself, you can create happenings out there. But there's that denial of it at first is, this is just a coincidence. Like, what, this happens all the time. I just think of something and then it'll happen. Then life does that way. But then when, it's, then suddenly that awareness and then entertaining the idea of like, what if none of this is a coincidence? And then that concept of a coincidence starts to fly out the window. And then you become hyper aware of so much that you're thinking and feeling all the time. So, and then that's that mindful self-discovery that all of the books in here lead to, like that's that whole thing.
Yeah. One thing that I don't know how to, I'm really interested in this idea of the collective mind, but I don't know how to access it. Though I will say that I have experienced times of being more alive and present with what is going on after practice, maybe when I've felt in more of a heightened state of watching and heightened state of observation. I felt like some of those insights have come, whether that comes as a wordless feeling, or whether it sometimes is condensed into like this something is like a crystallized thought, like I'm in the right place at the right time, or I see how this could unfold. I've had that happen, but not intentionally. Like I'm going to enter into this cosmic mind and then see what's there. So I don't know how that works, but I do trust that it exists. And I have some insights from practice, like that there is a much larger collective field. So
and it has to
it
be
really
accessible.
inspires me.
It has to be accessible. There are people out there who could very easily just access that without a problem. It has to be. Think about, even though you or I might not be able to access that consciously right now, think about all the things that have developed for you in the last few years, the insights and the understandings that have developed in you that you didn't have even 2 years ago. Or, I think about all the understanding that I've developed in the last couple of years, and I've gone, whoa, I'm barely even scratching the surface of any of this. Absolutely, I should more than likely have access to a collective universal mind. We'll see if I get there, but it's got to be there. And
I do think trusting in that may open the possibility, and then more insights will develop for us, like how. And
a weird thing, and I can't cite any specific thing because it's always so quick and just like so sudden and kind of gets me, like, just catches me off guard. But an increase in thinking that somebody is going to say something immediately before they say that. Like, I'll be on the phone with somebody and like just a phrase, whatever phrase, will pop into my head and they'll say it like right away. But it's really weird because it happens so quick and in such a way. You're not like, is that just a weird sort of a reverberation in my mind? Is that what, what is that? But having experienced it a few times, it's like, oh, there, like, where is that connection? It has to be there somewhere. So, and that's really, really fun and fascinating stuff. But it always feels so weird. You just like, you get this weird Truman Show feeling. Remember that movie, that Jim Carrey movie?
I know what show you're talking about.
Where he's like, everybody around him in his whole world is a hired actor. And he has no idea that he's living in this world where he's like, everybody around him is fake. And so and then he finally starts waking up to it, like becoming aware. It sort of feels that way.
Or Matrix.
A bit of a Matrixy feeling. Yeah.
I love that show. That's a yogi show.
Matrix?
Yeah. Watching that show is like, certain shows like that, I really feel like are can awaken you. Those kind of shows I try to find, and they inspire me to keep practicing.
Right.
So
I can get it. I can sort of see that from the Matrix.
yeah, there's a lot of parts. It's been a long time since I watched that, but
yeah, might have to watch that again.
maybe we should.
Should we have a movie
night?
night? Let's watch The Matrix and discuss how enlightening it is.
Seriously,
We could.
I remember watching that for the first time. It was maybe close to 6 years ago or something, after having practiced some yoga, and I just felt like I was watching what was possible for yogis.
Yeah.
So I gotta go back,
Right.
check that out again, see what I liked about it.
Yeah, might be able to get you on the right track to levitate.
We'll see.
I mean,
I'm not counting it out, but I have no idea how to do that now.
no?
No,
I bet you'll figure it out.
I don't know.
Right? Well, I mean,
But yeah, from a yogic perspective, there should be a way to develop it. There should be a methodology that you can be repeated. You can practice and you can repeat it, and it should. That's what I think. You should be able to do that, and it'd be a conscious decision.
right.
Then you're moving towards maybe more of a creator.
Mm-hmm.
That's the thing, though, I feel like is really interesting, is that if you are awakening to more creative power, then there would be much, much greater responsibility. Like, what would you actually do, though?
Right.
If you were more of a creator, like moving more towards like what you're talking about with God,
Yeah.
that kind of like creating of matter, what would you do?
That's so...
Like, that's like the Spider-Man quote, with great power comes great responsibility.
Yeah.
Like, really, though, what would I actually create?
Right. That's...
If I could create anything.
Mm-hmm. I mean...
I'm just like drawing characters and then giving talks.
Right.
Yeah. And creating a meal. Subpar. Kitcheny.
Yeah. I mean, but that's what's fascinating as well, is that every bit of it is all focused on the imagination. And like all of Neville Goddard's teachings.
I gotta check that out. I've
Yeah.
heard his name before, but I don't think you haven't sent me anything by him.
Maybe.
I don't think so.
I could very easily. I'll do it today, but
Okay. Yeah, I want to see what he has to say.
it's all just imagination. How the
Interesting.
strength and how powerful that the imagination actually is. That it can literally create something out of nothing. That is the power of God. We're exercising it every moment of every day without even realizing it. You know, like you'll be, I could be, I'm like taking my first break at work and then just driving and be like, man, tacos sound good, and then let that go by, and then lo and behold, end up having tacos that night. Like, well, that's kind of a God moment, but it's really just small, non-issue,
Yeah, that's what I was meaning by like, that's why I started too with having an intention, setting it, and specifically setting an intention and then carrying it out, like seeing how you could actually manifest, like just practicing 3 days a week.
Right.
Can you do that? Versus like seeing if you chance upon it. But what's really interesting, like you're bringing to my attention too, is that intention you do set will carry some weight, and whether or not it happens consciously, it can potentially like pan out that way.
Right.
But I think a yogi's mind is one that's more intentional about like creating something that you can, like something that's more dependable or repeatable, which is really nice when like you're working on yourself versus like interacting with like some other person or some other thing.
Right.
But it could expand to that level. So yeah, I think that's happening in everyone's mind, that these different things are, none of it's happening consciously. These different thoughts or patterns that are arising that are forcing people to just like end up at the Taco Bell. And they just feel like, oh, this is just where I'm at, or there's just probably no even thought about that. It's like, I'm eating because I'm hungry, and I'm gonna.
Right.
I'm not even aware what I'm eating.
Right. Yeah.
But wow, if you have one of those tacos, I haven't had that in so long, but it's so good. It's like a 6-pack of those crunchy
Yeah,
tacos.
a Doritos taco. Yeah, absolutely. But it's the thing too that you touched on about the responsibility of it.
Yeah.
If you do become aware on a level that's kind of what the game is, you know, like being sort of that sort of caretaker over that type of creation.
Yeah.
You know, the means for that type of creation to occur.
Mm-hmm.
The more and more aware you become of that, I think it's very... Now, it's accessible for anybody. So you could have a completely just ruthless businessman who's focused on nothing but money to use these tools and get what he wants. You know, that way. You can. But I think it's very natural, though, to start understanding that responsibility, you know, because when I started becoming aware that this might be a thing, it did make me very conscious of the way I was thinking, you know, and I was like, and I'll think very negatively and sometimes entertain a lot of those ideas. But now if I know, like, if I'm thinking negatively, that there could be real life implications for that. Like, I'm going to be more conscious about imagining that person getting in a car accident or something, you know, like that. It makes you much more careful about things like that. And at least I noticed for me that those things that come up when you talk about the responsibility, like how selfishly am I going to be using this, or what reasons, or whatever, becomes very... It seems to me that it became very natural to understand the best ways, because I'm suddenly aware of karma on a different level than I was before, and I'm becoming aware that anything I think or say or do or feel can generate that. I don't want to generate negative karma. Negative karma sucks.
Yeah, so I think that's like, I think what you're saying is that when you become more aware, then it becomes more natural that you are making decisions that are encouraging your growth. Yeah. I totally agree. Yeah. I've seen in my life, the more I understand things in a bigger perspective, the more that it's easy to make what would be considered the right decision. But I don't really subscribe to feeling that things are always right or wrong.
Right.
But when I say right, I just mean a decision that accounts for maybe a larger context, or also just is more supportive of my growth. So yeah, I feel that comes more naturally. So that responsibility isn't like a huge weight,
right? Or
doesn't create any more confusion. It's just like an awareness that, oh, there's a lot more variables that I realized are at stake.
Yeah. A
lot more things that are connected than I thought. So
and then too, I found the next inevitable step, though, after that, was really truly becoming detached, like the detachment from the outcome. You know, don't do the thing, but with no attachment to the fruits of whatever.
Oh yeah.
You know, and because at that, you know, there's a point where you have to sort of detach from it. You can desire the thing, but you can't have a death grip on it. You can't make it an identity. You know, it's just a thing that you're doing because you can do it and it's fun. And hey, cool, it worked. I can do this with anything. Whoa, you know. So it provides that amount of, you know, like that freedom too. It helps you get to that place of liberation.
That's in a different way. Yeah, that's a really beautiful way to look at that, because there's also a sutra that potentially says that this world is for you to recognize your freedom. It's for you to realize that. Yeah. And in our tradition, we talk about that as that can unfold moment to moment. And so, yeah, every moment or point of interaction can be something that guides your mind back. So, One thing I wanted to touch on though too, kind of like on the naturalness of manifesting things and how you could use it, responsibility, all that, is you're talking about like somebody could use it to in harmful ways or like negative ways.
Yeah.
Like I think that's true to a degree.
That's how I live most of my life.
But at the same time, I feel like it will backfire. I mean, like that's going to impinge back upon the person. So either way, they're going to have to account for, in my understanding, they're going to have to account for that. So though they may feel like, oh, I got the leg up because I've got this power, they'll have to eat that later.
It's that, yeah.
So it's like because sometimes I hear people talking about that, like if you get a bunch of power in yoga practice, then how will you use that? Or like anybody can just do this, and then some guy can like use that to your advantage and take advantage of a bunch of people. But if you are really practicing yoga, you won't be able to use it that way. Or if you do, then it will just impinge back upon you.
Yeah.
You lose.
You're right.
In the end.
And that's the thing is because at a certain level you are sort of the center of the universe. Now, never mind the fact that there are 8 billion other center of the universes out there, but with how that is for you, there's a boomerang effect for karma and stuff like that. There are karmic orbits of things you'll put out that is going to come back, and being able to see that with some amount of clarity came from this sort of practice. Because if I don't know I'm creating bad karma, I don't know. Then something just bad happens down the road, or something I don't like happens down the road, and I have no awareness of any correlation. That's just how life shakes out sometimes. But now if I'm a little bit more aware, we could just say a little bit, even, I'm going to understand, one, that I don't want bad karma to come back to me. I don't want, the result of something negative to come back to me, because that doesn't feel good. But then you naturally empathize with whoever's out there too. Like, I don't want to generate bad karma for you, because that sucks and that hurts, but also it's going to come back and hurt me too. Yeah. And that's just what makes it bad all around, So you learn to try and do it another way. You try to do it different ways. Eventually, you're just a person in a great mood and very positive all the time. This is what it'll turn into.
Yeah, I honestly feel like
whether you get that fat bank account or not, you still wake up and you're like, man, today rules.
Yeah, inner wealth.
Yes.
And it can manifest in physically to a certain degree. But yeah, I'm with you, is that the more I think about and I'm trying to understand what karma really means and this law, the more I feel it makes me relaxed. Right. Because what is unfolding, that I may interpret it as bad or negatively, definitely didn't exist without a cause. Right. So just knowing that, or having some vague understanding of it, at least lets me feel more relaxed. Like there's a certain order to things. Like it's not just like, I can't catch a break, my luck kind of attitude, but more like, okay, well, maybe this is a part of something bigger that I don't understand. Maybe I can take a deep breath. Maybe I can intervene, or maybe I don't need to intervene. I can just watch. So I feel like it should empower us. Yeah. And I'm hoping as I keep practicing and learning, I'll keep seeing the nuances of it and understanding it better. Right. But yeah, the best way is to be cheerful, in my opinion, is just to have that kind of acceptance, that attitude of acceptance, and keep progressing. And
yeah. And it's supposed to be fun.
That's with like manifestation. That is one thing that I feel has really rung true for me, is that in spite of all odds and whatever's going on, if I trust that there's a cause behind this, and I just trust in our nature as being sukha, which just means spacious, which ultimately for me manifests as being a cheerful person,
right?
Then I am seeing results from that. Like,
yes,
when somebody comes into a room with an inner smile, then everybody else is like, oh.
It's just people respond to it.
Yeah, and I've seen a lot of instances where I'm like with the lady at the bank or in the checkout line and just approach that person in a way where I don't need to control anything or fix them or anything, and respond in a cheerful way. A shift happens. Mm-hmm. People sense that.
Yeah.
They feel more relaxed, and then their own happiness manifests.
Right. Because you're just we don't feel an energy I can't smell an energy you're putting off or see it, but I can sense it somehow. There's that extra sensory thing. And you're doing that all the time. Yeah, if you're just beaming out that loving, spacious energy, people are going to respond to that. People are going to open up to it, or they might close off and get all weird. It might make them uncomfortable. I've seen that, but it's generally speaking, people will mirror back what is being sent to them, and vice versa.
Yeah.
It's fun, and it's so fun to watch.
It is fun.
So fun to watch.
It is fun.
And fun to just play with.
I feel like I'm going to try to even think about how I will work on this more this coming week. Now that you said this, we've had this discussion.
Right. And it'll be, if nothing else, it'll be fun to just go in, for you to just go in and play with your imagination.
Yeah. Okay. So one thing you talked about is for you're working on these two steps you've noticed are working. And those two steps, just like from my own review, the first step is that you create that imagination. You invoke the power of imagination about what you intend. Like, you set the special intention, you imagine it in detail. And then in that itself is probably like the putting it out there.
Right.
And then you're also talking about the second step of releasing that and letting go of, like, now that you've imagined it very clearly, you just let it be and see how that comes from it.
Yeah, you let it be, and with hopes that you just have that trust that it's coming to you, however, one way or the other. And so that detachment comes into play when you're not like trying to micromanage or see every little step in the process or something like that. Just step back and let the universe do what it does. But yeah, the imagination thing is big. Neville's two big things were use your imagination as vividly as you can, and then feel it inside like it's real. So, and if you replay this imagined scene over and over again, it gets more and more vivid, and then pretty soon you're emotionally going to feel like, oh, I have this thing. And then that is a state that is a state where you just try to stay, and then it'll come. So in theory, that's what what happens in theory. And
okay, one more thing I wanted to talk about in terms of manifesting is I feel like one of the greatest instruments that we have to manifest is also our voice. Our
speak
speech.
It into existence.
Speaking it. That is one connection that has been shared with me through my teacher, and I'm discovering is the power of our speech. Yeah. And how that really starts to shape our world. And that can be at a subtle level, because we're just thinking a bunch of words. So and even when you visualize something, if I try to visualize something clearly, then I definitely have words that will surround that. So, but the speech thing, I feel like when it really, you are manifesting when it exists in a subtle state and then comes out into life, breathes out into life in terms of voice,
Right.
like sound and the vibration.
Yeah. That sound, that vibration
Vibration
goes out. That generates energy. That generates momentum. And weirdly enough, the things that you speak come into existence. Speak it into existence.
Yeah.
Which is crazy. You feel like a magician in a sense.
This is sometimes why I feel yogis just go silent.
Right.
Sometimes I am challenged by that idea pretty frequently. Is sometimes I feel that I should just remain silent, and then I can always hear Swamiji in the back of my mind repeatedly telling me to create and share and do all these things, and so I just run with that. And it's a lot of fun. But there's sometimes when I think about the like how important speech is, and like how connective, like you're talking about, that whatever I'm saying is going out and impacting. Sometimes I just feel I should just stop. I should just be quiet.
Just for the sake of listening, or
yeah, just because.
Is that coming from a place of like you're talking too much about, you're thinking like you're talking too much about stuff you're not sure of? Correct.
That's one. Okay. That's one thing about it. Like,
okay.
One aspect about it is I don't really know how this works.
Yeah.
And two, that listening attitude, maybe I can just listen instead. Right. And that's most of it.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's mostly what feels. Mostly it's like what fuels that attitude.
Sure. Feeling like that though, I think completely contradicts what we're doing here. I approach this. I come here like for our conversations, and I'm just like, I don't know anything, but let's go have fun. Let's go play with it.
My mind goes between both of those, and I end up between what I've been taught and just my inner feeling is, I think that attitude sometimes can also be born out of fear. Like we were talking about the responsibility, like when you start understanding that maybe what I'm speaking is interacting with this living presence, and you feel like I don't know what to say, or I don't know how that works, or I really don't know the impact of what I'm saying.
Right.
Then I feel like ultimately that can lead into a big mental conundrum of of becoming more reclusive and more exclusive, which I think is negative and not helpful at all. So I end up, after I think about that for some time, I end up just wanting to do things like what we're doing now.
Yeah.
It's just share your creativity and be your cheerful self. That's my resort. That's my fallback.
Right. Yeah.
And that seems to be working.
If anything else, man, I could just rely on that. So.
Yeah. And I just have to remind myself about that, because I want to still keep an open mind, and I want to keep that openness about learning more about how the universe works. So periodically I have to do that silent space, whether that's whether that's for a half hour on my mat, or whether that's that remembering, or like that state of dropping things for some time. Mm-hmm. Maybe I'll pick them back up, but I feel like that's periodically necessary for me to remain as a learner.
Right.
But
it is very important to have those quiet times, those real introspective, real quiet moments.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's just.
But yeah, if I lived that way all the time, then I would miss out on the learning part of, like, it's kind of like Swamiji's given me this example before about how do you swim? You just jump in. Mm-hmm. And I'm going to learn pretty quickly. Like when I try to grab onto the water, I plunge under.
Yeah.
So I have to learn this new way of wiggling around and keeping myself afloat.
Right. You can read books on swimming all you want.
Yeah.
It's not going to prepare you for
for
jumping in the water.
So I think that we can take that analogy to life, is jump in.
Yeah, for sure.
Get this feedback.
And this thing, this concept of manifestation is just that.
Yeah.
Jump in and explore with it. Play with it.
Yeah, that's why, like, you're really inspiring me, just like some of your experiments about imagining things, and just test it out, see if it works.
Right. Mm-hmm. Right. And that's a thing. See for yourself. See for yourself how how it works and if it works.
Yep.
See if you're a skeptic,
Uh-huh.
if you're the most like agnostic skeptic in the world,
Yeah.
you know, but you try it,
Mm-hmm.
eventually you're going to start to see some correlations.
Mm-hmm.
And those are always really eye-opening, even
Yeah.
on the slightest level.
Mm-hmm.
You know, just it is fun. This is a thing that makes everything fun,
Mm-hmm.
because it's that creation. It's that you are creative and you're not attached to any of it, so it's just you're conducting. As a conductor, the symphony is just the ether you're pulling the noise out of, and that noise hits the air and it becomes reality, and you're just pulling it out as a conductor, and it feels like that, and it becomes really magical and really fun and very fulfilling, just because you have a better understanding of your place, of where you reside, at what level you reside in this physical universe. If I'm born with a creative imagination, I have to use that. Obviously, it's here for me to use.
Yeah, it's a great privilege.
And when I use that, things are born from it. That's obvious. Oh, that's what I'm here for. That's what, on some level, that's what I'm here to do. And so having that understanding too, which I believe is more important and more valuable than anything else, is it helps you pull back a few more layers to figure out who you are. Exactly.
Yeah.
Like just getting through those layers,
Yeah.
and it simplifies things a little bit more. Which I think is great.
Yeah,
that's
so great.
That's the best part about any of it. So, yeah. All right.
Cool.
I think we're about wrapped up. We're at 1 hour and 10 minutes.
Sure.
Or an
No,
hour
this
and
is
12.
really nice to talk.
Yeah, for sure.
I think we could probably talk more on manifestation in future episodes.
Oh, yeah.
One thing that would be interesting that we could look at is if we can start to find, like, you and I have both started to work on some kind of like steps that we feel are important to manifesting things. But in future episode, I think it would be cool to look at some other people who are really, maybe some of these manifestation.
There are gurus.
Yeah, there's gurus.
There are
see
gurus,
what
yes.
they're saying, if they have steps, and see how that aligns with what we're thinking, and
Right.
do a little bit more research. I want to do some more research personally. So
Yeah, for sure. For
Okay.
sure. And I've got a ton of different resources for you
cool.
to check out. And I still keep meaning to check out the Yoga Sutras, which you quoted a bit. So I think I'm gonna start that this week.
I'll give you a good translation.
All right, cool. If you have one,
Yeah.
I'll take it.
Okay, cool.
All right, cool. Well, thanks for the chat. Thanks for listening. And
Yeah.
we'll see y'all later.